as we mentioned before, the point of this whole workshop or conference is not just to sort of learn a bunch of new stuff, but to now go back to our towns and have the kind of proactive discussion that will avoid some of the conflicts that that so often come up, because we will have talked about it, and to really help us with that process of working with our towns. We're thrilled to have Val Ferro from Good Earth Advisors. Val is a certified planner and environmental scientist with over 30 years of experience in municipal planning, redevelopment, revitalization, permitting, and public outreach. Prior to starting Good Earth Advisors 6 years ago, she was part of a corporate sustainability team for a large international consulting and development firm, where she examined dozens of sites as candidates for sustainable redevelopment with a focus on transit, brownfields, green infrastructure, and alternative energy. She also helped implement a patented modular green roof system for public and private buildings. She's done due diligence evaluations of large-scale solar arrays in Connecticut, and my personal favorite, Val volunteered to help create criteria for planning points as part of the Sustainable CT program design team. She really lit up the room during the development of these criteria. So many of today's towns have already benefited from Val's know-how. As a municipal advisor, she facilitates revisions of local plans of local plan development, POCD, and helps design sustainable economic development initiatives. Val?
Thank you very much. Lexi, geez, hard act to follow. Thanks so much. And of course, thank you to PACE and the sponsors for doing this. We know we're living in the age of COVID. We've had some technical challenges, but thank you so much. I'm looking at the participants. We're still hanging around 100, so we've certainly kept you engaged, which is what I certainly want to talk about. Just as an aside, for all you AICPers out there, Connecticut AICP, we have posted this for 3 CMs. I believe it's already posted, so after this, you're allowed to log in your credits, and through that, there's also evaluations. You folks know the drill, but I just want to make sure that you understand we've got that posted. So, yes, we're going to talk about engagement, and Mark, go to the first slide. So, and Mark, I think you made reference to it at the top of the workshop that almost every day we're logging on or we're picking up the newspaper, and these are the types of things we're reading. So what I want to do, and I know we're a little short of time, so I'll try not to talk too fast and rifle through these, but I will. I really want to provide an overview of bringing the siting issues to the forefront, doing this through outreach, through engagement. And you know, we've heard today about siting council jurisdiction, and we might get into that question and answer later, particularly with Robin participating. But most communities I work in, they don't understand siting council jurisdiction. And you know, they might not even know local zoning regs, and then they put the pressure on these local municipalities to do something. So they don't really know the understanding of this jurisdiction. So having a conversation will be good. Next slide. You know, I don't think we talk enough. Nowadays, we kind of hide behind social media and sometimes gets a bit raw, but we want to have meaningful conversation. We want to have proactive discussions. We want to get ahead of the contentiousness. And to do that, we obviously have to be authentic and transparent and recognize that there will be conflicts. And so having conversations and sharing information and educating, and look at what we've just learned today through this workshop. Some of these tools that the folks that preceded me have shared with us, I think if we can communicate those and let people know that we can strike a compromising balance, we're going to move the conversation forward. But we want to do it proactively. And oh, by the way, this is not just for renewables. This can have applicability to other sustainable principles and actions. Next slide. So, You know, the line is drawn. You know, the odd thing is that citing renewables is a major land use decision. And let's be honest, welcome to Connecticut. We have 169 fiefdoms. And all of you planners out there, municipal planners and municipal folks, you know what we're talking about here. So we want control and we don't have control. But that doesn't mean we can't have meaningful dialogue and try to proactively get in front of perhaps a development initiative. And in the long run, this might even have benefit to a local property owner that wants to do something with his or her land and seems to be overwhelmed by the process. So doing this we're in an odd situation because everybody in this workshop, I think we're all endorsing renewables. We all embrace sustainability. We try to live sustainably, but yet the conundrum is that there's times when we are citing renewables that there are environmental conflicts. There's economic conflicts, there's social conflicts. And again, where do we start? Next slide. You know, I'm all for having a purpose. You know, we are not just party planners. We're just not going to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, because it doesn't take people, particularly in Connecticut, and us, you know, nutmeggers, to understand when somebody's just having a meeting to say, we've engaged the public, they know, we can move on. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about true, meaningful dialogue so that we can advance the understanding of citing renewables. So having a purpose means, you know, do we want to engage and educate residents and that's all we do? Fantastic. It's a great place to start. Do we want to connect with landowners? Yes. Trying to do that at the same time would be helpful. Maybe this is going to be in advance of issuing a request for a developer if a municipality would like to do something like that. And just maybe we want to draft a new section of the Plan of Conservation and Development. Remember, every 10 years we have to update that plan. But in the interim, wouldn't it be great to address renewables and start thinking about sustainable principles in advance of that 10-year benchmark? And last, you know, we talked about citing council jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a discussion about regulations and standards for balancing use and balancing resources. And what that does is signal to a developer, regardless of citing council jurisdiction, but that puts a prospective developer on notice that you understand the process and that even if renewables might not be in their jurisdiction under the zoning regs, you've had this discussion about how to protect things and strike a balance. Next slide. So there's nothing worse than meeting fatigue. And I think those of us that have done plans of conservation development, and it's like, you know, after the 20th meeting, people are like, you get the professional meeting attendees, you know, that come for the milk and the cookies, but no one else. This is not what we're talking about. So what I always recommend is to find an opening. You know, look for something that's upcoming or ongoing. You know, your local energy commission, I know sometimes for years they've been just discussing rooftop solar, engaging residential solar, things of that sort. Wouldn't this be a great opportunity to give them a new renewed call to action and something they can embrace and lead? We talked about the Plan of Conservation Development and Zoning, but there's also resiliency and climate change planning. There's farmland and agricultural protection and open space planning. And of course, let's not forget about sustainable CT and certification that I certainly encourage all of you communities to pursue. And just to backtrack a little bit on open space, you know, 25 years ago, we were having conversations about acquiring open space that I think now is very similar to how we have a conversation about renewables. So it's a similar cycle. It's just maybe a different topic, but I think the bones of the discussion are there. Next slide, please. I'm a gardener, so anytime I can use this reference, I try to. And, I believe in recruiting gardeners so we can plant seeds, because I find that term stakeholders kind of sterile, kind of institutional. So, go out into the community and look for gardeners. You folks know who they are. Respected citizens that maybe not, they don't talk a lot, but boy, when they open their mouth, people sort of say, oh, okay, this is meaningful. If they're in it, I want to listen. Elected officials, of course, agency and commission members, that's a no-brainer. I'm a very, very firm advocate of citizen ambassadors and citizen planners, folks that really want to take on a cause. And then, of course, as our previous presenters have made reference to nonprofit organizations and other people that might be able to come together and help this dialogue. And that's why basically the seeds are having the discussion at a very informal level, so that when you do launch informally, you have some support and you have some linkages to get your message out. Next slide, please. Well, planning, yes, we need to think ahead. We just can't go do this. And so to help formulate a strategy, there's some things that, I always like to ask. It's like, in your community, how are we currently addressing renewable energy and sustainability? I mean, you certainly need to take a look back and see what you've done, and then try to come to a plan that fits into your community. Having a technical lead is helpful, because we are talking about technical information, and you do need someone to lean on from a technical standpoint. And you also need people to speak clearly and with facts. So you need to think about the messenger. And then, of course, do we want to go big or do we want to go small? Do we want to just disseminate information, or do we want to have a big splash and really get out in the community and do this? So those are the kind of things, and I'm sure there's a dozen more, but those are the kind of things you want to start examining. And in fact, you could start very small by having this type of dialogue with a small group of advocates. Next slide, please. So when we have these conversations and these connections these days in COVID, the age of COVID, there's a lot of tools to our trade. Meetings, social media, informational outlets. The important thing is to be real, and so what fits for your community, and also to be flexible and constantly monitoring what works and what doesn't. One of the things that we have done is started small, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but there is nothing wrong with looking at your whole toolbox here and coming up with a number of items that work. Maybe they don't work, but try them, and then you can adjust accordingly. One of the things we've done, again, just thinking about COVID now, we've put up lawn signs with, you buy a burner phone with, because I'm finding Twitter, yes, Facebook, yes, but it's amazing. Everyone texts, including my 88-year-old parents. So, even little lawn signs that say, hey, yes, I really endorse renewables, or isn't it great that we're looking at, X, Y, Z for renewables? Things like that, very easy and inexpensive. Next slide, please. So a little bit about property owners, because you know what? They're people too. we forget that. And in my experience, they're sometimes at the back end of things that, they're the evildoer. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe that farmer is going to let that solar array being placed there. So we do need to be respectful of property owners. We want to engage them early, engage them often. And sometimes, it might be running parallel to an outreach, a general outreach program. And getting back to the technical support, maybe possibly doing a technical screen in advance in your community might help move the conversation. Brownfields, old, tired retail, because that's just dying on the vine, as well as open farmland and things of that sort. What we have to be careful, of course, is that, we can we can prioritize, we can do inventories. I see someone mentioning brownfields. I have done a boatload of brownfields work. It's probably 80% of my involvement. And that only is going to take you so far, because who's choosing the prioritization candidates? You've heard Green Skies and other people talk about economic viability, which we can't assess. So you have to be respectful of the property owner, and somehow, you've got to work through the system. So it's not as easy or as process driven as, well, let's just do an inventory, because you do need to have property owner buy-in. Next slide, please. And yes, we actually want to get something done. And this, of course, is directly dependent on the goals that you set and what type of community you're in and what type of opportunities are out there. So I came to develop these 3 little things that we can do, particularly in the age of COVID. Having a kickoff. This could be a really big splash or not, but just, reaching out to the press, posting on the websites, doing email blasts and social media blitz, that sort of gets people primed for the conversation. And a couple of easy things are fact sheets on the siting council, how to balance resources. Hey, did you hear about goats? I mean, anything like that to share. And remember, this could be hard copy, it could be electronic, but getting those facts out there would really help move the conversation. And then, this is just so old school, but comment forms, I still use them. Quick little story that, I used to take a bunch and I'd go over to like the senior center. And the last time I went, and it's amazing, our town elders, the insight that they have. So I go over and I drop off a bunch, and they're like, we don't need that. We have iPads. I was like, okay. So, you have to consider demographics too when you're formulating your strategy. So those are 3, quick little things that you could do just to get your launch. Next slide, please. So these next couple slides are really just mix and match. It's not everything. But, I've done three-part public forums where we have an open house where people just come, maybe have some refreshments, look at some of the materials we have, engage some of the technical people, and then have a formal presentation with some facilitated breakouts so that people understand how to cite. We could give them that exercise. If it was you, how would you cite this? What do you think the issues are? And then you could step down from there. Maybe just have, a 2-part program where you have an open house and presentation. Certainly that's more conducive to educating instead of just completely facilitating, exchanging. And that's, of course, true of educational workshops. Think about what we've heard today. Anyone that has spoken before me today could conduct a technical educational workshop that I think would be fabulous for communities to learn about and embrace. Next slide, please. Whoa, you missed one. Back. There you go. Mark, you have finger fatigue? I love targeted conversations. You notice I don't use focus groups, because to me that's a marketing and advertising, which I've done a fair amount of, but I don't really use focus groups. I just have conversations with smaller groups. And they're usually like-minded people, just to noodle through some of the things that are on their mind and help me formulate maybe a strategy for a larger group. So that's another tool. And certainly ongoing and informal things, pop-up events, just showing, hey, we're at the grocery store, we're at the library, we're at the senior center, anywhere that right now that we're under 25 people with a face mask, whatever it is, showing up informally and having informal dialogue is just great. And then piggybacking on existing community events, PTO or a soccer event or whatever, again, go where the people are. just to get your message out. And if we do have to worry about social distancing, having some poster sessions and having a static display, and then maybe a sign up if you want to start assuming an email or a blog list, that would be helpful and a good time to do that. A little bit about preference surveys, because I've seen some wonderful images in previous presentations where I just can't wait to do, some type of visual preference survey, which you can do online. I've done them, through SurveyMonkey or what have you, that, you show people the options of what a compatible siting of a large solar array would be, and let them give feedback. This is good. This is not good. Again, it encourages that dialogue. And then, as I said, the property owner discussions. Property owners may be willing to have a discussion and show up in a larger forum and discuss his or her goals and maybe even the struggles with keeping a farm or making things work. That has to be done very carefully. And of course, when you do that in a municipal setting, we always have to worry about the Freedom of Information Act, because some of this information might be getting out if he or she's in active discussions with a developer, maybe can't say the type of information that you're looking for. So you have to understand what the confines of that would be. Next slide. This goes without saying, yeah, we're going to have some meetings, but don't we want action? We want implementation. We don't want to just have meetings for meeting's sake. And this is where I think your champions, your leadership comes into play, so that you can go through this planning process of defining actions and assigning responsibilities and timelines, so you know what to expect. And then use outreach and in the dissemination of information in that process. And then when you do get something done and you can achieve success, or maybe you get something built, boast about it. Let people know that the process worked and how well it went. And then, of course, we're never done. We're never done, as you planners know. You start again and you keep continuing that dialogue. Next, please. So I'm going to close with my five things that I always tell people when we're beginning some type of engagement program. First and foremost, there is no recipe. I know we like to read something and check off the box and follow instructions, but this is when you really have to be creative. And there are tools out there. I've shared a few with you, but don't feel like there's a confine to this. So there is no cookbook and there's no recipes in the cookbook. Next, please. Yeah, one of my favorite. Again, you can have a lot of meetings and it looks like we're getting so much done, but nothing's happening. And so never mistake commotion for progress. I mean, you really need to understand what your goals are. And even if you start small, achieve that small little goal and then share that success. Next, please. We have politics, use it. I think when you have polarization, you kind of know where the middle is. So you figure out where the polarity is and try to find common ground. Find some, and you're not going to make everyone happy, and you shouldn't. You shouldn't, because a community should be diverse in many, many ways. And so there's room for all sorts of political opinions, but use it as your beacon, as your bookmarks, to find out where the conversation may start. Next, please. Facts matter. And I think no matter what happens in the conversation, you must demand technical defensibility. There will be emotion here. The community in general will be engaged but emotional, but you need to run through the technical defensibility regardless of the conversation, regardless of the polarity. It does make things valid. Next, please. And again, respect property owners. There has been issues with like inverse condemnation when a state agency has discussed a property and people go to sell their property and they hear, oh no, the state was going to take your property. So you have to be careful of how things are done in public. You have to respect the property owners. And again, we might have property owners out there in each of our communities that actually could benefit from some of the education that we're talking about, some of the information that we were sharing today with you. So regardless of that, we do have to respect property owners. And you know what? We have to respect everyone, really. In the age of just saying what you want to say, and you know, sometimes I feel like tomorrow we're going to have people starting to run red lights because they don't think red is appropriate. But you know, we need to respect folks. So I'll close with that. I'm sure there's questions, but I know we're running short on time. And Mark, I'll let you moderate if there's some burning questions, but I think you're telling me we want to move forward.